They're always like a central hub for the modern versions of what we're dealing with and experiencing. And so even in Flat Earth, there are lots of things I've learned about sort of the Nazi organization, their pagan belief, their pagan mythology, the societies that they implemented, and a lot of what was going on in the scientific culture of Germany, that actually, it just led me to ask some questions, that just led me to even think that the Flat Earth stuff was even highly probable. Just looking at the way that some of this, everything, let me just say this, everything about them led me to believe, man, that this whole Flat Earth cosmology issue is super interesting. So let's go to the first slide, Mike.
Okay.
Are you going to run it from, I don't have a clicker for this?
Yeah, I'm trying to set that up, but go ahead.
Okay, let's go to the first slide. Way back. That's not right. Yeah, right there. Okay. So, something that I ran into reading books trying to study Nazi ideology was that the Nazis were weird, man. I mean, they were weird. I mean, some people, when they say Nazis, they think they understand what they're talking about. Most people have no idea who the Nazis were, where they came from, and what they believed, okay? So when I was looking at some of these cosmological issues, I kept running into this, the history of NASA, right? Everybody's heard of NASA, right? Everybody who in Flat Earth has heard of NASA?
Oh,
You can't separate the foundations of NASA from the Nazis. They played one of the biggest roles. So I'm going to give you a few of my conclusions first. Let's go to the next slide, Michael. So we're going to start with the occultic side, because what I want to do is just build up this presentation, show you who they were, so that when we get to the beginning of NASA, we understand why we don't trust them and why we don't have to trust them, okay? So something that's always perplexed me is that throughout the years when you study this topic, when you look at the whole history of what happened in Germany, the theories for how the leadership under Adolf Hitler were capable of producing such a large collection of these atrocities, right? They go largely unexplained. The secular responses often contradict each other, and when added up are of such a general nature that people studying the subject are left to conclude that, simply put, one bad apple spoiled the bunch. Nothing could be further from the truth. When you read the history, nobody does an adequate job of explaining how the Nazis came to the positions that they did in their own ideology. It is rife with pagan mythology. Let's go to the next one. The answer is the occult. The occult is the biggest determining factor in everything that happened in the Nazi Party and the birth of the Third Reich. Next. The Nazi world, these are some of my conclusions, just so you understand where I'm coming from before we dive into some of the facts. The Nazi worldview is largely based in a mythological belief system in alternative histories such as giants, hollow earth, cosmic eyes theory, magic, Vril, Aryan supermen, advanced spiritual technology, pagan deities such as Odin. Odin plays a huge role, right? Most people don't realize that. They were heavily influenced by medieval fantasies and Eastern mysticism as well as Oriental forms of Freemasonry. They hated modern secular Freemasonry. They wanted to study Freemasonry that was ancient and came out of the East because they saw that it had ties to the Aryan supermen that we were trying to backwards engineer to. Next. When given a choice, German leadership always sacrificed reason and logic at the altar of superstition and mystical ideology. Okay? So when the Nazis were presented with an option of a direction to travel, what should we do? When they had to ask themselves, what do we do next? They would always sacrifice reason and logic for the pagan mythological belief system and their own ideology. They would go the supernatural route before they ever thought about it. That is how deeply entrenched pagan mythology and occultic ideology was in the Nazi Party. Next. And I'm talking fast because we got to move fast. So if somebody doesn't understand something, just scream out. They set out to create a new chosen race, essentially replacing the people of God. They believed this new race would be endowed with supernatural gifts and would be free from the burdens of guilt and conscience. They indulged their demonic desires to wage war on the moral character of God and to liberate the new chosen race from the shackles of moral slavery by way of a new Messiah, the almighty, magnificent Führer. Not only, we'll get into the actual cosmology and stuff that they believed, but one of the aspects that makes this so dangerous is that they literally were trying to create a race of a new man that was incapable of feeling. Blind, obedient servants that took what they said as scripture, so to speak, because we all understand that. They did not want a thinking people. They wanted people that were born and bred to serve. Next. They're doing it now, exactly. We don't have time to make all the connections, but I'm just hoping as we go through this, you guys will make all kinds of your own connections and do your own thing. Conspiracy theories that insinuate that the Jews were responsible for the world's evil and that Hitler was only combating a hidden Zionist agenda, I really think missed the bigger picture. Hitler sought to eradicate the perceived threat only so he could elevate the German people to a fascist dictatorship, bringing new order and new religion. World War II, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, was a war between secret societies. The version of World War II that we're taught is not what was happening behind the scenes. There is another story behind World War II that people don't understand. Next. They didn't trust the cosmological paradigm coming out of the West at all. They went to war with Einstein and the rest. They considered relativity, and a lot of theoretical physics coming out of that time period, they considered it to be a Jesuit conspiracy that was misleading people purposefully. Now, we're never really going to fully figure out exactly 100% in detail what they believe. But something is so interesting to me is that with all the money that they spent investigating this topic, they didn't believe anything coming out of the West. They saw it as one giant conspiracy. And as we're all asking the same questions that we are today about what's going on, we're not really that much different in that regard because what we're testing and experiencing is not matching up with what's being pushed on us, right? Next. The foundational worldviews that led up to the formation of the Nazi Party and subsequent horror show that followed were still held by many that played pivotal roles in the formation of NASA. The Third Reich transitioned into the Fourth Reich and is still alive and well today. I had a conversation with a gentleman, I don't know if he's here yet now or not, but he's spent a lot of time looking at corporations. The Fourth Reich is alive and well in corporations. When you look at this subject, you see that pretty much they all just went to Argentina. I don't believe that Hitler committed suicide on Walpurgis Night. I don't believe that. I think that was written because he was a big fan of Walpurgis Night. I don't think you could have written a better suicide story. Let me put it that way. I don't think it happened.
It's confirmed in JFK files that he survived past that.
Absolutely, 100%.
Some people think it's so
Hey, it blacked out.
Uh-oh, okay. Got it.
All right, next. So, we're going to talk about Volkisch, okay? The political party, the Third Reich in general was part of something called the Volkisch movement. And I'm going to just tell you a little bit about Volkisch. Next. So, anti-Semitism was not something that just exploded in Germany at the onset of World War II. This is something that was going on for several hundred years. There were these Aryan ideals and this philosophy and purity of race that they had adopted that came from Eastern mysticism, right? Anti-Semitism ran rampant for a long time, and it set the stage for what we saw in World War II. It was deep in German culture. 100 years before the German Jew emancipation, they were locked behind ghetto walls with special curfews, taxes, restricted marital rights, limiting the age of a Jew can marry to 25 or older. Next. In the early 1800s, Germans had plenty of their own problems and issues. It was a dark and depressing time. Historical accounts describe a spirit of disappointment and desperation hanging above the German people like a cloud. We all know that desperation sometimes breeds fantasy, escapism, right? We're looking for the thing that solves all of our problems. We're looking to the thing that gives us hope. And there was a movement born in this dark and depressing time in Germany that led to a lot of what we saw. For a while, German philosophers began looking to Eastern philosophy as a romantic escape representing a golden age long hope for it. Essentially what that means is that they turned to the occult for the hope that they had. That is what happened. Eastern mysticism is something that's creeping into the church today. It's one of the most deceptive and prevalent heresies and one of the most deceptive and dangerous things that creeps in unaware because in many aspects it can be so subtle. In their culture it wasn't subtle, but it became romantic to them. It became what they fantasized about. They looked to it for a hope in the future. Next. Friedrich Schlegel said, "It is to the East that we must look to the supreme romanticism." Next. The spiritual journey to the East undertaken by German scholars, philosophers, and men of letters brought a new mythology to a politically, economically, and socially despairing country, a mystical view that all finitude is the result of a fall from the absolute and that the effects of the fall have to be repaired by the course of history. Next. The writers began to glorify the Middle Ages as a byproduct of this, as a period of dialogue with God when men, art, and religion had been unified to restore the lost innocence became their aim. Not only did they look to Eastern mysticism for their hope, but they then began to idolize an era that was also incredibly dark. If you guys research the medieval history, that was also a very dark period of time, but it became what they fantasized about. They wanted unification. They wanted unification of this, you see a lot of the Gregorian chanting, this idea that we can reach out and touch God. And there's a mystical quality to Gregorian chanting. There was an atmosphere and an air. It was spiritually destitute in reality, but it ushered in an era of reaching out and touching things that actually weren't born of the Holy Spirit. These things weren't godly. They then start, getting involved in the life of a lot of these people that were reaching out and touching them, and then breeding these ideas and these philosophies that ultimately led to one of the biggest atrocities in the history of men. Racial purity among the ruling class was a primary component of ancient Hindu doctrine, and within a short period, having been adopted by the Germans, they began to rationalize and espouse German superiority over the Jew. This was only exacerbated by the theories of the early 1800s that the Aryan forebears of India and ancient Germans shared the same mystical symbols and gods. So here we have this idea of racial purity that now moves into the hope, right? Next. Between 1857 and 1910, the Jewish population of Vienna increased by over 400%. This started to worry the Germans that were in Germany, right? At the time, Austria was a part of Germany, so we're talking about a larger territory. But what happened was that the Jews were suppressed, they were emancipated, their population increased exponentially, right? Because you still had them estranged at the time, they didn't have a homeland, they started moving into Germany. Then they started, once they were emancipated in 1871, large percentages of these Jews, because the Jews are gifted, right? God's taking care of His people, right? We see that. I firmly believe one of the reasons why, the financial centers in the world are run by Jews, and I'm not getting into the Zionist conspiracies and stuff. I know that this black magic, Kabbalah, and a lot of this stuff exists inside, some of this Jewish culture. But what I'm trying to say is that they do have some sort of inherent natural gifting that's allowed them to survive all these hardships all these years. So naturally, when they were emancipated and given a lot of these extra rights, they began to flourish, right? They began to move into medical professions. They moved into banking. They were doing extremely well. It began to worry those that had already adopted this idea of racial purity, because now they see an outsider that's doing better than they are in their own land, and tensions started to arise. Next. Yeah, for the Germans who began to see this as a problem, there was this new movement called the Volkisch movement. There's not another word, there's not a word in the English language where you get a direct translation of Volkisch, but it is a cult of race. Essentially, that is what it is. There's no translation for it, but it is a cult of race. That is what started. It became a political cult of race. Volkisch was predicated on the superiority of the Aryan race and the demonization of the Jew. It was essentially a cult of race. Now understand, and I know we're moving fast, that when we talk about the Aryan race that they're talking about isn't just the white man, it's the supernatural white man of long ago. So already in this movement, they have a pagan mythology that's leading to their ideas in racial purity. Racial theories of history developed, and they heralded the coming of a new Messiah. Next. Propaganda was developed against all foreign elements. You had massive groups of people and a lot of these supernatural, not secret societies, but fraternal orders, not necessarily so secret, but they attracted quite a few wealthy people. They developed propaganda, started passing out pamphlets about racial purity, really preaching this ancient Aryan gospel. Mystical concepts of Reich and Volk were developed, while simultaneously anti-Semitic nationalistic cults began to spring up in secret throughout Germany. Everywhere. The culture of the German people became incredibly pagan and incredibly hell-bent on racial purity. So this period of mystical Reich and Volt that I speak of ultimately led to this quote about its climax in history. And I found this quote interesting. The best of them found refuge from the despair of their daily life in a perverse fanaticism called the mysticism of a political movement. In almost no other country were so many miracles performed, so many ghosts conjured, so many illnesses cured by magnetism, manipulating cause and effect, the kind of animal magnetism that you find in the occult, so many horoscopes read between the two world wars. Next. A veritable mania of superstition had seized the country, and all those who made a living exploiting stupidity thought the millennium had come. Many were convinced that the course of history was the sinister result of the ministrations of ancient secret societies. As such, they considered not only modern Freemasons, but also Jews and Jesuits. And that was from the memoirs. So we're going to talk about, I wanted to set the stage for the atmosphere and the environment, right? Because these people that we're fixing to talk about that were pivotal to the birth of the Third Reich and ultimately what's taking place today, the ideology that's still believed, these were the people that were instrumental in it. We don't have time to go through every aspect of their life, but I want to give you a few highlights so you understand where Hitler got his ideas, because Hitler was largely influenced by everybody that we're fixing to talk about. First of which, George Lanz von Liebenthal. Lanz was the creator of the Order of New Templars in Germany. In 1900, he was the author of a racially charged magazine called Ostara, and this was a massive influence on a young Hitler around 1909. This is part of the propaganda we talked about, the magazine Ostara. Imagine going to Walmart or CVS or something and you see a magazine on the stand that's just preaching racial purity of the race, going with lots of pagan mythology in the magazine as if it was fact, and absolutely preaching the denigration, the desecration, and the elimination of anybody that wasn't part of the pure Aryan bloodline. That would be weird, right? I mean, that's not, even in the worst of our, civil rights movements, we didn't have anything that crazy, really, that was public. This is on another level of psychotic to me. So this Order of the New Templars that he created, they used the swastika symbol first, right? So they advocated master race ideals. They developed rituals from appropriation of the Holy Grail traditions and Parsifal. You'll notice there's a very popular classical artist named Richard Wagner, right? A German composer. He composed an entire orchestra. It was known as Parsifal. It was an opera. Hitler was obsessed with Wagner. He was obsessed with Parsifal because it carried with it not only this ancient German mysticism, but it carried with it ideas of racial purity and the mythology. You see that influence even in the classical music that came out of Germany to this day. And I would love to do a presentation one day just on Wagner, because essentially you're going to an opera about Nephilim and Superman, no doubt. Hitler spent his money as a youth in the same way that kids would go to a movie store back when I was a kid and rent a video game. Hitler was spending his money going to the opera because he was obsessed with the messages and themes of Wagner's work. This is the mindset and the feeling that's happening behind the scenes in these secret societies. So, let's see. Yeah, Parsifal, figure of Arthur, the legend of Arthur, known as Sir Percival, who is in turn a later form of a hero of Celtic myth. They worship these ancient heroes. They believe that they were evidence of the ancient Aryan bloodline that we were all trying to get back to. Next. Let's talk about the swastika for a minute. We don't have time to talk about every pagan symbol in Nazi culture. But the swastika wasn't a cult symbol for the sun, right? It was adopted. And what you see is something I've always found interesting with NASA, right? Sun worship always comes up when we talk. You can't escape the idea of sun worship, right? When it comes to pagan mythology. And when you look at the 66 and the 666 is attached all over the movement of the sun and the angles of. A lot of people accuse NASA of being a form of sun worship. Without getting too much into that, because we don't have time, let me just tell you, the Nazis were the foundational people of NASA. Without the Nazis, NASA wouldn't be what it is. And we see early on evidence of a massive belief in sun worship. This was very important to them. The swastika was a symbol for the sun. It represented life. The sun represented life to them. Many Germans believed that inequality of the races was proven by some loving the sun more than others. Sun worship as a pagan ritual became important to Volkish groups. Let's see, I missed. Sun worship as a pagan ritual became important to Volkish groups. They literally considered inequality of the races to be proven. Like, let me just put it this way. If I love the sun more than you, I'm superior to you. That is where they place sun worship. Next. One shall remember that the swastika and fascist movements are basically offspring of Ostara. So in 1927, Ostara has already claimed credit for the promotion and the acceptance of the use of the swastika. Very, 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 very prevalent and very, very influential. Lanz was a defrocked Cistercian monk. He believed that ancient Aryan heroes possessed these organs with electromagnetic radiological properties which gave them the ability to harness it. I sound like a raving madman right now. I understand this. I sound like a lunatic. I don't want you to think I'm a lunatic. I want you to understand the point I'm getting at. This is sensational to the extent that you need to understand how radical the mindset of these people were before they did what they did and created what they created, okay? So, Lanz literally wrote a book called Theozoology, or the Lore of the Sodom Apelings and the Electron of the Gods. Okay? This was reading material, right? He was a defroxisterian monk, okay? He believed that ancient heroes possessed organs with electromagnetic radiological properties which gave them the ability to harness energy for special powers. He believed that by establishing special breeding colonies, they could reclaim those lost physical traits mentioned above. We see that with Lebensborn later on, which we'll talk about, the breeding programs where they wanted to create a lot of illegitimate bastard children that, you know, well, there's a really key fact where they would actually encourage them to have conceived inside of Nordic cemeteries because they believed that you would actually incur the spirits of the ancient heroes. So much so that the government produced maps of where Nordic cemeteries were, encouraging young youth to have sex there so that their children could fall in line and hopefully lead to, through a eugenics movement, creating these ability to harness the vril and all of that again. So anyway, next. Okay, so basically, theozoology not only promoted the Aryan superiority, but it also seemed to call for, you know, let me just read this to you. He wrote Theozoology in 1905, in which he advocated sterilization of the sick and the lower races. So even like Margaret Sanger and the eugenics movement in the 1920s and 30s, where do you think that came from? It came from the same ideology. Sterilization of the sick and the lower races, as well as forced labor for castrated chandels and glorified Aryan races as godmen. Lanz justified his esoteric racial ideology by attempting to give it a biblical foundation. The devil twists scripture all the time. You know, I mean, it's completely Luciferian. According to him, Eve, who he described as initially being divine, involved herself with a demon, gave birth to the lower races in the process. Furthermore, he claimed that this led to blonde women being attracted primarily to dark men, something that could only be stopped by racial demixing so that the Aryan Christian master humans could once again rule the dark-skinned beast men and ultimately achieve divinity. A copy of this book was sent to Swedish poet August Strindberg, from whom Lanz received an enthusiastic reply in which he was described as a prophetic voice. So even poets were praising this ideology. You guys follow me? Is this making sense so far? I hope I don't sound like a raving lunatic. Next. We're going to move to a guy named Guido von List. List was the founder of the Arminen Society in 1908, and the Arminen were the theorized priest kings. We don't have a whole lot of time to get into the history of the Arminen, but they were the theorized priest kings of the ancient Aryan race, the priests of Wotan, and of which he believed he was the last priest of Wotan. Next. In St. Stephen's Cathedral, go ahead and go to the St. Stephen's Cathedral. At the age of 14, this very young List, right, vowed to build a temple to Wotan while praying at an altar in the catacombs of St. Stephen's Cathedral in Vienna. He was a member of the Austrian Alp Society, which was an early adopter of the Hail symbol, very pagan in its own roots, and he was primarily responsible for reviving Teutonic folklore and its mythology. You have a 14-year-old boy that in a Catholic cathedral pledges to build an altar to Wotan when he grows up. How does a 14-year-old boy come to that conclusion unless the society and the culture that he's living in is completely and perpetually corrupted and breeding that mindset?
That's right.
It just doesn't happen unless you're surrounded by madness. So when this 14-year-old boy adopts this as his life's goal, understand the world that he's living in. Next. As the last of the Arminen priests, List passed on the ancient wisdom he was able to divine through intuition and clairvoyance. Sacred knowledge was hidden in the words and signs, and he used this knowledge to widen support by reviving pagan worship. It was well received and boasted membership of some very wealthy backers. List wrote Secret of the Runes. Next. The Nazis were obsessed with the idea of runes. I'm going to show you some of them. We don't have time to talk about them, but they bore magical qualities. It matched perfectly with their Aryan ideology. And Wotan was said to be the inventor of the ancient alphabet as part of his secret sciences. Wotan received these by hanging on a tree for 9 days, starving and thirsting while performing a shamanic ritual. This is actually an artistic depiction of this shamanic ritual. It was believed to be a powerful secret lore for which runes became a tool. Next. These are the runes that he concocted. So pretty much what happened was, List believed that these runes were revealed to him during a mystical experience that involved the opening of his third eye. So already we're treading in danger. Does anybody ever really trust anything again? If somebody says, well, my third eye was open and I received this, I automatically don't trust it. I'm a guy that fights New Age, the New Age movement, New Age mysticism, Eastern mysticism creeping into the church. He pulled something out of the demonic ether.
That's right.
No one has ever proven whether or not Hitler was a part of this order. Hey, go back to this slide real quick. You notice this? The sixth soul, representative of the sun. One on every SS, the SS, right? You see that? You start seeing the rune ideology. I want to point that out real quick. Next. So I'm telling you, they wore runes. Runes were so important. These guys would walk through the wilderness and up the mountains just looking for ancient stuff, right? They were so obsessed with this pagan mythology and the roots in Germany. It was completely enamored with it. Now, no one has ever proven if Hitler was a member of any of these, right? We don't know. There are a lot of references in text and stuff where people write about it, but let's see. We do know for a fact that he met with Land several times, right? We know for a fact Hitler loved buying the magazine Ostara, and Mein Kampf. He actually several times in person he attested in his book Mein Kampf to this period of time, reading Ostara and gaining this knowledge. He referred to this time period of his life as a period providing him with the foundations of a knowledge, right? Hitler has attested to being enamored and largely influenced by the propaganda that came out of Ostara and the men that, foisted it on him. Next. Membership in both List and Lanza societies were interlocking and had some very prominent members in 1912. In 1912, a number of members of both Aryan cults came together under one roof in the German Orden, and political party paramilitary organization inspired by the Teutonic Knights were valuable in the prefiguration of the Nazi Party. Next. So then we got this guy, Adam Alfred Rudolf Glauer. These names are so hard to say. My name's just Jared Chrestman. They've got like 4 or 5 of them. It sounds ridiculous. Heavily influenced by the Theosophist Society, Helena Blavatsky. Everybody, who's not heard of Helena Blavatsky? Right? Okay. Yeah, dude, we don't have time to go into theosophy, but understand that plays a big role too. There's just not enough time, 45, 50 minutes to get through it. Yeah, so it was a blending of the occult and science, essentially. It was a whole movement that we can merge both. And this is essentially what the Nazis were doing. It said that Hitler slept with a copy of Helena Blavatsky's Secret Doctrines at his bedside. But heavily influenced by the Theosophist Helena Blavatsky, teachings of the Aryan race, he founded the Thule Society, which later, after a split, evolved into the Nazi Party. So that's how Thule fits in, even though we don't have time to talk a ton about it. Next. Sabbatendorf was an adept occultist, well-researched and educated in Islamic mysticism, alchemy, and Rosicrucianism. It's one of the ties he has to Blavatsky. Blavatsky was Russian. She came out of a Rosicrucian order. She was financed by him. Theosophy in general was financed by the Rosicrucians. I learned that from Gary Wayne. I thought that was interesting. Through Rosicrucianism, he was initiated into Freemasonry. So, next. So, Sabbatendorf believed that old Freemasonry kept the secrets of the Aryans and the alchemists, and he was not a fan of modern Freemasonry and believed the secrets died out with the old Masonic guilds. He became obsessed with medieval architecture after learning ancient Aryan secrets had been encoded in them. He respun myths of Atlantis and renamed it Thule. So one of my interests is, as we look at the idea of this thing in the north, right? Rob talks about this mountain. There's all this legend and lore about this crazy stuff that's going on in the north still to this day. They were obsessed with the north. It always went back to the north. In fact, they even renamed this. They thought Atlantis was in the north. They renamed it Thule to match some of this pagan ideology. But everybody was obsessed with the north. He was also obsessed with architecture. It's one of the reasons why they were obsessed with medieval architecture. Good.
I just want to ask a question. We're going to work 9 here. And
Yeah, I understand. I'm sorry.
No. I think you're doing great. But is it possible that, you can get us this so that we can watch it at work too?
Yeah, I don't know how exactly. Maybe you just need to do a YouTube video about it, use the slides or something. I'll work on that. I've never had time to do this presentation, and I don't think I had time to do it right or make it palatable. It's so much. It's such a big picture.
Well, even if you were to just throw it all on a PDF or something so we could just read it.
Yeah, I'll definitely try to figure that out. No problem, dude. So one of the reasons why they were obsessed with medieval architecture is just for this reason. They believed that the Aryan secrets that they worshiped, that they were after, that they were interested in, that would yield, fulfilling this vision that they had for the future, they believed that all of what they were seeking was encoded. They worshipped. So that's one of the reasons why they were so obsessed with the medieval thing. Both he and Blavatsky believed that the residents of Atlantis were giants and that they were represented in stature by the statues on Easter Island. So this is where the giants enter in. They believed that the ancient Aryans were taller, stronger. They believed in the Nephilim, essentially, is what they did. They just had their own spin on it. They believed that the Nephilim, so to speak, even though they didn't call them the Nephilim, they called them the Aryans, they were the ancient race. And they really thought that the size of the Easter Island statues depicted the actual Aryan man that they wanted to backwards engineer to. Next. The Thule Society was the name of the ancient Aryan homeland, an island in the far north still preserving the ancient knowledge and guarded by ancient super beings akin to the ascended masters of theosophy. It became the political strong arm of the German Orden and helped prepare for a counter-revolution against the government so that the long-prophesied Führer could be firmly established in leadership. Next. They studied the occult meaning and symbolism inside the ancient German alphabet. They were fierce anti-Semites. They preached the coming of a Führer that would erase their current form of democracy. They collected weapons for revolution, they bought newspapers, they instigated terrorist activity, created frenzied racial propaganda against the Jews. Next. They were the political strong arm. The Thule Society made this happen. They were very influential. They believed the earth was hollow and inhabited by a race of super beings. The ancient Aryans were said to have descended from this race of super beings. Once initiated into Thule, you were supposedly able to contact higher masters through magical rituals, and the masters would endow the initiates with special abilities. You still see that in Freemasonry when you receive gnosis from Lucifer by pledging your loyalty and stuff like that. These were ancient concepts. We still see them implemented in secret societies to this day. Now, the Thule Society had a special branch of female mediums known as the Vrillerennen. Next. The chief of such was Maria Orsich. Maria served as both leader of the Vrillerennen and was Hitler's personal medium. She was a centerpiece. This woman is probably the most influential in Hitler's circle. This woman was good at what she does. There were demonic gifts here. She was significant. A lot of people don't even know who she is. She was his personal medium. Okay, so when it comes to this whole idea of Vril history, which a lot of people have heard of this concept of Vril, don't have a lot of time to get into the origin of that belief system, but this woman was primarily responsible for it becoming popular. Through telepathic automatic writing, Maria made contact with a race of beings who supplied her with technologically advanced blueprints for secret Nazi projects. That led to things like the Nazi Bell Project and everything else, like the World War II Foo Fighters that you hear about, a lot of that stuff. This comes out of direct mediumship and this technological download. It was said that she was writing technological specs in a trance. She was literally, there was a download of technology that they started to implement in special projects as they worked towards some of this stuff. I think they had anti-gravitic technology and stuff that they were working on primarily. Next. These messages were presented to a small group of leaders representing the Thule Society, the Vril Society, and the Black Sun Society. Legend has it that through automatic writing, she wrote her transmissions in an ancient German secret Templar script and another in Sumerian. And she didn't know these. She didn't know the Templar script. She didn't know Sumerian. And I can't vet this. No one's ever really been able to vet this, but it does seem highly probable. Next. One of the reasons people fail to look at the occult as a motivating factor is due to the historical accounts of Hitler's painstaking attempts to eradicate occultism when he first came to power. People mistakenly assume that this was because Hitler was opposed to irrational forms of faith. On the contrary, Hitler and the Nazi Party took it so seriously that they believed it posed a threat and they sought to control it. So early on, some of the biggest arguments I've ever heard for why you can't associate the occult with the Nazis is because Hitler did try to eradicate it in the country. But he wasn't trying to eradicate it because he thought it was BS. He tried to eradicate it because if you were good enough if you were good at it, then you worked for him or you didn't do it at all. It was an act of control. And that's a philosophy and an ideology that was very mechanical in its nature in the German party, in the Nazi party, that I still see attributed to some of the things we talk about today with NASA. You know, I'm very interested in this concept. They controlled the narrative. Next.
Absolutely.
For us, politics means the elimination of all forces except those serving the one constructive idea. This is a quote. In the Third Reich, we have to forbid astrology. We cannot permit any astrologers to follow their calling except those who are working for us. In the National Socialist state, astrology remains it's a singular privilege, is what that translates to. The ability to perform occult works and to engage with the occult was considered a singular privilege in Germany at this time. It's not for the broad masses. Next. So, okay, I'm glad we got here, because I don't think we're going to be able to finish the whole presentation. There's too much. But let's talk about eternal ice. This is their cosmology. Not only do they have these crazy pagan mythological belief systems, but they believed in something called, it was the concept of eternal ice. That should sound really interesting to people that look at flat earth cosmology, especially when we look at a vaulted dome. We're curious about the nature of this dome. Let's go to the next slide. This guy's a mechanical engineer. He's a kid. He's working in a metal foundry. Right? He came to believe that the moon, he used to just sit out and stare at the stars, according to, accounts. He came to believe that the moon was a floating ocean of ice, right? So, as an engineer, later on when he actually became a mechanical engineer, he saw molten steel contact the snow. And you can see YouTube videos of this. There's a violent explosion, right, as the energy transfer. So you've got this molten steel that comes into contact with snow, and you have this violent event. For some reason in his mind, all of a sudden, he knew the nature of the universe, right? He sees molten steel hit the snow. Boom! I figured out how everything was made. Right? That's such a radical leap, but it shows where his mindset was. We always sacrifice logic and reason at the altar of this occultic ideology, and he begins to pursue this. This experience led to this ultimate cosmology and obsession with the relationship between cosmic ice and fire. These are their words: cosmic ice, cosmic fire. Next. He believed that Earth's gravity had captured many moons in the past, each one eventually colliding with us, creating massive calamitous events resulting in the Great Flood, the loss of Atlantis, and the twilight of the gods. So, not only did he believe the moon was made of ice, right, but he also believed that the Earth had many moons, and that the destruction of Atlantis and the Aryan forebears, it was all caused by this massive calamity, which isn't completely unfamiliar concept to us when we look at the flood of Noah, right? You can see how they're tailing on a lot of stuff you and I here have understand or studied. They've just got this mythological Gnostic slant to it, right? They're also spending lots of money trying to prove these things to be true. They're finding evidence of these things. Their conclusions are radically different and unbiblical. But you can see why, just like we are, they don't trust anything coming out of the West, because the West is pushing nothing but BS on them. They know that something's not right. The Volkish loved and supported the work of Hans Warburger because it further explained the existence of the giants, who they still believed lived in Hollow Earth. They believed that the gravitational pull of some of these moons created 16-foot humans and enlarged vegetation that we know once existed. When you look back at the records, you see evidence of massive plants, right? Animals and insects were bigger. I think pre-flood, you have that whole canopy theory, right, that we all know and love, that would have increased lifespans and so on and so forth. Now it's my concepts of that have radically changed with this flat Earth stuff. But there was evidence of, just much larger stuff. They were trying to account for it. Next. At 65 years of age, Horburger stood firmly against the world of secular astronomy and publicly issued a warning that the objective science that objective science is a pernicious invention and a totem of decadence. He's speaking to the Western world. Einstein and the rest of the guys. Next. He supposed ice to be the basic substance of all cosmic processes, most impressively materialized in the moon, the Milky Way, and the ether. Apart from purporting to explain all the astronomical, geological, and meteorological phenomena, the Weltischer cosmic ice theory, I don't speak German, I don't know how to pronounce that, but cosmic ice theory was also said to be the foundation of a new cosmic cultural history. They did not know how to diversify their eggs in baskets. They went all in on everything that they did. If they believed it, they went all in, right? So now we're talking about a guy having a vision looking at the stars. 2 minutes? Okay. And next thing you know, we're going to change the cosmic cultural history. So forming both the scientific and philosophical, poetic and artistic, cosmotechnical worldview, their words, the Horbiger called it the astronomy of the invisible. And I've got all these sources and stuff. You guys can go fact check these yourself. Next. This is where it came to, right? Either you will learn to believe in me, or you will be treated as an enemy. They were told to have prospective employees sign a statement reading, "I believe in the theory of eternal ice." is that significant. Either you will learn to believe in me, or you will be treated as the enemy. It goes right back to this idea of controlling the narrative. They didn't care. I mean, you guys get the point. I don't have to explain it. Next. Let's go. Just keep going, because I'm going to tie it up with NASA, because there's so much more here. Heinrich Himmler, everything, the SS. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. All right, right here. Yeah, right? So, next.
There we go.
Nazis, go back one, yeah. Nazis not only exhibited a great deal of influence inside of NASA during the heyday of its formation up to the Apollo moon landings, but indeed that the Nazis exercised the greatest influence inside the organization, eventually co-opting or making common cause with two other significant hidden and esoteric influences in the space agency. This came from Joseph Farrell's book, Nazi International. I love these quotes in this book. Next. Over the course of years of research, Hoagland and Barra identified three groups, each with their own connections deep within the world of the occult and esoteric traditions, that each held significant positions of managerial power and influence within NASA. Masons, magicians, and Nazis, but less well known were the other two occult groups, the Masons and the magicians. This is the foundation of our beloved NASA, right? Everything that the founders of NASA believed came out of this bizarre presentation I'm giving you today, right? It's encoded in the programs, it's mathematical, it's Gnostic, you have these Egyptian overtones in every project that they've ever had. It is from one end to the other, they have encoded, in the same way that these people believed that in medieval architecture the secrets were encoded, you see the same principles encoded in the maps of the landings and the trajectories. It's such a big picture. It's so deep. It's so complicated. It paints one big picture of deception to me. I never looked at flat Earth and I didn't trust NASA because I understood where they came from. I was primed and ready to receive some of the flat Earth conversation without being upset because I already couldn't stand NASA and didn't trust the thing that came out of them because I understood this. Next. Each sect is led by prominent individuals and supported by lesser-known players. Each has stamped their own agenda on our space program in indelible but traceable ways, and each remarkably is dominated by a secret or occult doctrine that is far more closely aligned with ancient religion and mysticism than it is with rational science and cool empiricism these men promote to the general public as NASA's overriding mantra. Next. We are uniformly, unabashedly conspiracy theorists and have, against our wills, become truly convinced that there has been a conscious, careful, planned, and permanent cover-up by NASA. These people that are writing this don't even believe it. They're not flat earthers. This isn't a flat earth thing, right? They're trying to figure out what the deception is. They became truly convinced that there has been a conscious, carefully planned, and permanent cover-up by NASA of some of its most extraordinary discoveries made in the course of the agency's 44-year history. That was secret history of NASA. Next. All of this, of course, implies that there was a secret agenda to the early space race, one having nothing whatsoever with beating the Soviet Union to the moon. Next. And you guys, I'm going to have to get off the stage. Do you guys understand how this paints one big picture for everything we're interested in today? Does this make sense? How it casts a lot of doubt on some of the stuff we see? A lot of other people have made these connections. If one thing has ever been made clear to me in studying the history and the occult side of NASA, it's that I can't trust NASA, and I have no reason to. So when people tell me I should do it blindly, it's what the Nazis did. Look what happened. All right, thanks, guys. Thanks for hanging out.